Good evening. I'd like to call to order the September 13th, 2021 work session of the York County School Board. We are already heading into mid-September and our year is moving along as we work through the expected and unexpected changes. I think we can all agree that it's been great to have students back in the classroom for 5 days a week. We appreciate everyone working together, remaining flexible, and having patience as we continue to make strides. We have several presentations lined up for this evening, the first one being our opening of school report, and I'll ask Dr. Shandor to share more information on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham, and good evening, board members. We have 7 presentations this evening and 2 policy first reads, so we'll jump right in. So we are, as Mr. Higginbotham indicated, in our 3rd week of school, and I want to share just a brief update relating to the opening of the school year. During the first 2 weeks of school, I had the opportunity to visit all of our schools, and we had all of our executive team members as well visiting all of the schools that first week, as well as our maintenance and transportation departments. Over the summer, our team has been busy doing multiple projects in order to prepare for our new school year, and I want to share just a few of them. So first, just a few numbers for you. The square footage that was cleaned this summer by Mr. Dolak's team. Our team cleaned over 1.8 million square feet, which is the square footage of all 19 of our schools. But I do want to let everyone know we still have 17 open custodial positions with recommendations for 5 offers. And we appreciate our custodians and maintenance crews who worked long and hard to get our schools ready for students. As far as construction, there's a number of things that we accomplished this summer, so certainly want to commend Mr. Shearhart for his work on overseeing these projects. We renovated the library at Bruton High School into a learning commons, and that project is near completion. We renovated the restrooms near the School of the Arts at Bruton High School. We're working towards completion of that project. We also renovated the York Middle School main gym, including painting, lighting, and wood floor installation. We're working through completing that project as well. We also renovated the Tab Middle School main and auxiliary gyms, including painting, lighting, and wood floors there too. We also started repairing and coating the York High School roof, and we also completed the drawings and specifications for the renovation and additions at Seaford Elementary School. All of the updates so far look really, really good. I appreciate the work of our team and Mr. Shearhart organizing all of it. We had many committed people to get things done ready for the open of school. Dr. Carroll will provide an update on transportation during his operational update, but I just have a few things to share as well. Over the summer, all 160 buses were inspected and underwent maintenance and service. It is important to note that the transportation department received 1,235 calls on the first day of school. So obviously we'll be looking at our plans for next year. We're already planning on how we're going to work through the opening of next school year with reflections on this past opening. Currently, we are processing numerous requests for alternate pickups and drop-offs. We experienced some transportation issues, and we continue to review the problem and problem solve them as they arise, but I will share I'm proud of our team, I'm proud of our drivers and everyone in transportation. Everything got a little better every day, which it typically does during the opening of a school year. We still have 27 openings for drivers. If you're interested, this is the commercial part. Please contact our HR department at 757-898-0392 and ask for Dr. Vladu. He'll point you in the right direction. Also, all of this work prepared us for welcoming 12,248 students on August 30th, which was our first day of school. The enrollment number's grown every day. We're at 12,596, and we monitored this very closely. Our projection was 12,420, so we've exceeded that number by 176 students. We also welcomed 893 of our students as members of the class of 2034, which is this year's kindergarten class. This is an increase from 209 students from last year's class, the class of 2033. All right, so just one fun fact for the first day of school, and I apologize for the poor dad humor with this, but during our first 4 days, we served approximately 240,000 ounces of milk. That equates to 1,875 gallons. So the average dairy cow produces 8 gallons of milk per day. So it takes 59 dairy cows per day to keep up with our demand. you might want to say, holy cow. It's terrible dad humor. Anyway, we worked through some of our usual challenges, but overall, we had a very successful start to the school year. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. It's always incredible to hear about the different things that go into preparing the buildings to have students in them again. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Our next agenda item is an operations update. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Dr. Carroll is going to present to you an operational update, which is going to include a lot of information related to, obviously, to pandemic and some of the statistics and numbers that he usually does, and he's going to conclude his presentation about transportation. Dr. Carroll.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Excuse me, Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board. As requested tonight, I bring you an update on COVID and related actions. So here we see the local York County statistics. You'll remember that the CDC case rate for determining the rate of transmission is the number over 7 days. So you can see here that, and this is from this morning, that we're at 26.3. This is well under the state average today of 40.5. And so over the 7 days, you multiply that by 7, that gets you to 184.1. You can see the yellow trend line that is coming down. So this is all good. This may indicate that we are past the peak of the wave. And we still need to field the Labor Day positive cases that will still be coming into this weekend. But this data is very encouraging for the future as far as this fourth wave. Also wanted to point out our current dashboard with our numbers, and tonight we will review our current conditions and also some additional features that we've made to the dashboard. So first, of most important, is our active cases, and as of today or this morning we sat at an even 50. We have also included an additional graph or trend line at the top that shows new cases by dates. So when you're looking at the graphs and the top two graphs, that first one is kind of like accumulations for those individual days of people that were positive. And then the second graph just shows you the new cases that were reported on that day. So you see a similar curve, but it looks slightly different. Then if you're on our website and you tab over, then you see this page, and this deals with our quarantines. And you can see that we are presently only at 114 out of those 12,600 students that Dr. Shandor mentioned. So we're in pretty good shape, and it's important to note that because there was a lot of talk at the beginning of the year. We were on the news about how we had 300 people out, and it was presented as if students had hit our building and then we were putting 300 out. We inherited the vast majority of that, well, all of it, from the summertime. But it is true, we had just over 300 students that missed one or more days during that first week. Well, now that's improving, the numbers are dissipating, and since September 2nd, more students are coming out of quarantine than are going in on a daily basis, so we see this number falling. You'll also notice that we've added a new button to this page. It's the one that's that kind of plum color, and that number is the number of students that were able to avoid quarantine because they had a vaccination. Now, of course, this is only open to our students that are 12 and over, but that's 84 students that were able to stay in school instead of have to go through a quarantine because they were close contact. Also of note, we can only provide the data that is provided to us. So we can't stress enough to our families to contact the schools and their nurses right away as soon as they know that they have a suspected case of COVID or have a positive case. And as always, there's always a little bit of lag in this data, just as VDH has, getting it into the spreadsheet, and then we backdate anything that needs to be backdated, and then it corrects over time. But it's just important to point that out. In addition, we're reporting tonight that we are going to start reducing the whole school communications when we have positive cases in the building. There's been so much that has been happening, and so everybody's getting these calls when they're not being directly involved. Of course, we'll keep making close contact communications, and there will be weekly updates maybe when students are in a class or on a bus, but we feel like the whole school calls are kind of overdoing it, making everybody kind of oversensitized to that. So we're going to be reducing those starting later this week. Also want to talk a little bit about vaccinations. These also are the numbers from this morning, and they continue to grow incrementally, and we hit some milestones today. So in the top left-hand corner, you see the 12 to 15-year-olds. This is the one-dose number, and we finally passed 50% over the weekend, so that's a milestone that we hadn't reached yet. And you can see we're just short of the 16 and 17-year-olds hitting 60%. Certainly by my next report, we'll be over 60% in that category. Now with the 50.6% in 12 to 15-year-olds, 38.8% are now fully vaccinated, and for the 16 to 17-year-olds, we're now up to 47.5% that are fully vaccinated. Those represent increases of 13% and 10% since we started tracking this data on July 27th. So we are seeing an increasing number of students that are getting the vaccination, and that, of course, is the first line of defense, the most effective line of defense, but it also keeps students from having to be quarantined if they're exposed. Finally, in the bottom left corner, you see the vaccination rate for 18 and over in our community, and one dose, we're just short of 70%. We'll be over 70% the next time that we meet. Now, what is not in this number, and I verified since we last spoke, is that these numbers do not include the military vaccinations. And we've seen some preliminary numbers, but they're not exact. But as of right now, it looks like that for the total in this county of 12 years old and up is really more around 80%. And so that bodes well for the future also. Also have some additional vaccination news. I spoke at the last report about booster shots, and we were looking at that. We're currently investigating our ability to conduct a staff-wide booster shot clinic at or around the 1st of November. Now, this would only marginally affect the community, but as far as our staff, this puts us close to the 8-month mark for the vast majority of our people, because we started giving vaccinations in the middle of February. So that puts us kind of right in the middle. And so we're looking for that, but we're also waiting to see capability as far as getting support, like from fire and life safety with the EMTs, how much our nurses are allowed to give shots, and also we're waiting to hear on Moderna booster availability at that time. Also, this is a new table for you. This is something that we've now been supplied from the local health department since the beginning of school. And I wanted to congratulate our parents, because as you can see, in every category, 12 to 15, 16 and 17, and then that total, we are the only division that has students over 50% vaccinated. And so I wanted to share that with you. And we lead the peninsula in that category. Also wanted to let you know that I had omitted something last time we talked. We were talking about, the public health order and the school exception on quarantines, and I gave you the first two things that were premises for a waiver on having to quarantine, and I had in error not told you about the fact that if somebody has proof of having COVID in the past 90 days, they don't have to quarantine. So that's a third way that you can get waived out of a quarantine, and I just wanted to correct the record on that. Okay, so now I turn to transportation. As Dr. Shandor mentioned, we've had considerable difficulty there, and I want to thank the schools and the parents for their patience and their cooperation in this. And as previously reported, this significant issue really comes down to understaffing. And so I want to paint the complete picture for the board. So here are the specific numbers, and this were as of Friday. So first of all, we have 160 buses that are in our fleet that can run at any time. And we have 115 budgeted positions. So that gives us an extra 45 buses than we even need. So we have that capability. If we have the drivers, we have the buses. So buses aren't the problem. So then when we look at what we actually have working, we have 88 bus drivers currently working. So that's 27 short of our budgeted positions, which we would consider fully staffed, and we wouldn't expect to have any problems. And so you can see that's a significant deficit. Now, when we look at the actual routes that are run, and when I say a route in this situation, I mean a whole run, 3 runs in the morning, 3 runs in the afternoon. We have 6 routes that aren't assigned to any driver. They need daily coverage. That means we're pulling people out of the office to cover most of those. And number 9, the number 9 is the amount of routes that are temporarily assigned to another driver, and that causes delayed delivery. So you can see where we're just in the negative here. And then, of course, if you have any daily absences, it exacerbates the shortage. We have 0 margin for error. We, in fact, have a negative margin for error. We do have 4 potential drivers currently in the hiring pipeline. And if they all get through the processes, that would attack those 6 routes that are unassigned first. And as we can continue to add people, hopefully we can keep working into those 6 unassigned and the 9 temporarily signed routes. So you can see that it's just a difficult process all the way around. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to try to make remedies in the short term. So the next steps for us, right now we're in the process of double checking and rebuilding special education routes for efficiency, and we know that that's there. We had reports of double the special education routes than we needed as far as students, so we're working on that, pulling those down as we speak. Those were worked on over the weekend, and they're being rerouted and should be communicated to schools and parents presently. Now, once we have that, and the fact that we're going to be at day 10 tomorrow, so we know who's now coming to school, and all of those students who have signed up for transportation are now in the system. Now we start to evaluate the regular ed routes and find if there's any way that we can find efficiencies. First of all, do we have spaces being held on buses that aren't there, or do we have overloads on buses where we need to move some things around? Those are the first things that we'll be doing to try to find efficiencies, analyze those, and if we can reroute things, reorganize to open up some drivers, then we will do that. And then the last thing we have to do is continue to improve on our late route communication. That was the source of all those phone calls the first day. We did have a technical issue that was preventing us from seeing 700 of the routes that day. So we couldn't answer the questions if we wanted to that day. Now, we got that quickly fixed. That took care of a lot of it, but the rest of it are these issues here. So all that we'll be doing with the working on efficiencies and rerouting will just be marginal. The only solution here is to have more staff, and we're working on that. And because if we don't, we will continue to expect and experience delays. And the only other way to fix that is to look at something more structural, like changing school start times and ending times, dismissal times. And if we get to that point, we'll make a recommendation for what would remedy our problems. And so with that, that ends our report, and I'll welcome any of your questions.
I have a quick question about COVID protocols. For students and staff who may have been exposed to a COVID positive person outside of the school, whether it's at a sporting event or at church or any other thing, what is the expected protocol for them when having to return to school, when they wouldn't necessarily have the close contact with the people around them there?
Well, it's the same situation. When somebody reports to us that they're positive and they're one of our students or staff, then we go into a contact tracing investigation. That's not limited to the schools and the buses. That also includes what happens outside in the community. We had a few birthday parties that really did us in last year. So we do all of that. And in fact, a lot of those, when you look at our dashboard, you'll see community-based and school-based exposure, and you can see the difference between that. And more of the exposures are from community-based. But we investigate all of that in the contact tracing.
Okay.
couple questions. What is our percentage of staff in vaccinations? Are we still around the 90 mark?
We don't have an exact number because when they actually got their shots, they didn't go through us. Our last good number was just over 90% from what we knew of when we were helping facilitate the signups. Now, we've had attrition over the summer, so we don't know, but I would think we would be relatively close to the same number.
Okay. And then you talked about doing whole school notifications and that was happening at some schools, maybe not at others, and you're going to change that and not do a notification to the whole school?
Right, we're
when
not
there's-
going to do a notification to the school if there's a case in a building, because we've got cases in every building right now with the level of community transmission. So we're still going to let people know on a weekly basis if it's been in their classroom or on their grade level, if that's appropriate. But the point being is that if you're a close contact, those are the people that need to know, and that's where we're going to put our emphasis.
All right,
And
so-
and that does remind me, I think I missed a bullet point on the slide when I missed President Biden's announcement last week. I know we heard about large employers that were going to have mandatory vaccination or testing. That did not apply to us, but in the same directive was that he was going to urge governors to make it mandatory for all educational staff to have a vaccine or test. Therefore, we are starting to have preliminary discussions in that area if that happens, but we haven't heard anything from the state.
But going back to the policy, the
Yes.
expectation is that if there is, as of right now, if there's a positive case in a school, the entire community would be notified, correct? We're changing that. That won't happen for that. If they want to see what's happening at the school, they'll have to go to the dashboard.
Right.
Correct?
But if it was in your classroom, we
They'll
would
be
let you know.
notified.
Right,
Correct.
so if it's
But
in
we're
your
going to do that
classroom,
on
you'll
a
be
weekly
notified.
basis. We're not going to do that on a daily and calling the whole school repeatedly.
Okay, so if you're in a close contact, you would get a call from the school nurse?
You will get a call.
Okay, and then you would get a letter home,
Mm-hmm.
correct, that would say you've been a close contact, blah, blah, blah. And that would happen, just telling you when you would have to quarantine till?
Yes,
This
and
might be
Ms.
a
Goff,
Catherine
I
question.
think,
Is
wants
that why
to
she's coming up?
clarify.
Sure, let me step in. So knowing that almost all of our schools already have a weekly messaging that goes out to their families, and then
Okay.
looking at the volume of calls and communications we've had this year, we will continue those immediate phone calls while we're in our contact tracing protocols to the close contacts. So if you had a personal exposure, you would be notified for your child.
Okay,
When the principal is doing, or the school administrator, whomever might be sending the message, they could send a weekly wrap-up to say, we did have the cases this week. So a whole school notification could still occur as part of their routine messaging, but this is part of that, trying to pull back on what is an information overload to our parents right now and make sure they focus on the really important topics that our schools are trying to get out to them.
Especially if you have multiple students.
Yes.
oh, no,
In
I know.
I can
I-
speak to certain
that's what I
families
was
that
trying to
already had
understand.
24
Would you be getting
messages.
3 calls saying, I have a case here, case here, case here, and that's redundant, getting that
Correct.
over and over and over? So you're just saying you're going to streamline the way you're communicating it?
Yes, ma'am.
Everybody can still have the same information available, but they would
All
have
the
to go to the
information will remain
dashboard
available, yes,
Correct.
ma'am.
and slide that little bar that gives
Yes,
gives the
ma'am.
date or whatever. All right, then, one of my last questions was the time frame for quarantine.
Yes.
If I have an unvaccinated student who's exposed, let's just say on a Tuesday, and the phone call comes home on Wednesday or Thursday that that student is out for an extended period of time, they can test
Yes,
negative and then come back how long after the test?
and forgive me, it gets complicated.
putting you on the
But
spot,
it's a
sorry.
10-day quarantine.
Okay.
Unless it can be 7 if during the window of 3 to 5 days, they get tested and it comes back negative.
Okay, and all this communication about testing and negative and all that will go straight back through the nurse. So that's our main point of contact for families if there's a
That
close
or an
contact
administrator, if they
Administrator.
have a lot of cases and they need help with communication, yes.
Okay, and then the expectation is that teachers are reaching out within 24 hours, putting work on Canvas.
Correct, yes, and I defer on to instruction on that.
That's
But
correct.
but they need to have a meaningful interaction every day, and so they know how to do that.
Okay. I think there's a lot of parents who, if they haven't had a close contact and they haven't had that call, they actually don't know what to expect when the quarantine comes. So that's why I'm asking these questions.
Yeah, that's a good thing, but they don't need to worry about it. When they get the call, it'll get explained to them,
Okay,
and
all
we'll
right.
work through the process.
All right, thank you.
Remind me, is it a PCR test?
Yes.
Is it? Okay, all right, thanks.
Go ahead.
Okay. My question's about bus drivers. Realistically, if I applied today to be a bus driver, how long would it take me to get into a bus?
If you already have and check me on this, Mr. Harder, if you already have your CDL, your appropriate CDL, then it can be within a week, correct? But if you don't have a CDL, then this is a multi-week operation to get you behind a wheel.
Okay.
But we do have the training for that,
We
correct?
do.
And we offer signing bonuses
Yes.
and
Oh, yeah.
We have a
referral bonuses
$1,500
for
signing
current drivers,
bonus.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you're an employee, any employee in the division, if you refer somebody, there's a $400 signing bonus.
Okay.
Or not, a referral bonus, sorry.
Good. That's another plug. Good.
And it's paid training, correct?
Yeah, that
Yes,
was,
yes, yes.
that was
Yeah.
actually something we changed some time back because I found out we were hiring bus drivers and for the first 5 days of training, they weren't getting paid until they got the CDL and who wants to work for nothing
Yeah,
for
well, it was
5 days?
there was an argument for that because we're giving you something of value.
There was
And
an
people would go
argument.
out the door, but it's gotten so competitive that.
It has,
that,
it
yes, we're paying them now.
So do we have a couple drivers or, with 100 people? Is there a couple that we're, maybe they're out because they've had a surgery and they'll be coming back in the next couple of weeks? I mean, is there that a
We do
number?
currently have some FMLAs.
Okay, so 2 or 3, 5? I was just curious if you knew. I didn't.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, sir, it's actually two that are
Okay.
out for that. And I want to digress just a minute, if I may. With regard to someone who comes to us who has a CDL already, it's roughly 7 hours of training that's required for them. That's a minimum, 4 hours in the classroom and 3 hours behind the wheel.
Okay.
Fortunately for us today, we actually have a young lady who came in with that same, she was already qualified, so she actually got her route assigned to her today, this afternoon, so she'll be helping us out in the Bruton, York zone. Subsequently, another young lady today who's a bus attendant, she was a bus driver before. She was approved today, she got her physical, so she will be starting class this upcoming week as well. Her, along with another young lady who was a para in the division as well. So we are making strides, it's just kind of tough sledding right now.
No, certainly understand. Thank you for everything
Thank
you're
you.
doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one more question about transportation. With pickup and drop-off, obviously, it's been a nightmare for years and years and years because you've got, schools in neighborhoods and you've got all these backups. If they were to make a change to the roads, and I'm going to use Yorktown Elementary School as an example, obviously, it's backing up into 17. We've got, sheriff's deputies there helping us. If we were going to make a change to scooting things over, doing a gravel area where we could pull over, would that be a school division issue, a county issue, a VDOT issue? I mean, is there a way to
Probably all-
rectify some of
yeah.
these situations?
If I could interject, I would probably say it's all three, all of the above. But I would also say, I wouldn't say it's been a nightmare for years. I think it's certainly highlighted by a pandemic where families are driving more kids to school and there's less kids on the bus. So there's a number of schools. I think Magruder is a real challenge. I know Yorktown Elementary's been a challenge. Seaford has been a challenge.
Grafton
Just there's
Mountain.
so
Yeah.
many, and our principals are working
Yeah,
through
they're all-
that. I know at Tad Biddle, Ms. Young she's really strict about having them pull up so the cars are as close as possible to get them off of Yorktown Road. But I will say it has certainly improved. The first couple days are always a challenge for traffic patterns. And most of our citizens realize, like, I'm not going down Yorktown Road at a certain time of day because you can go around, et cetera. So, but to answer the question about making those changes, it's certainly going to be all three. It would be VDOT, the county, and us having those conversations. Because we've had discussions about Seaford Elementary. as
Right,
well.
and then with the Seaford renovation, there's, we are going to expand the parking lot, and there's also going to be a turn lane, and that's kind of what we're arguing about, working through right now, is the length of that lane, because a specific speed then dictates the length of that lane, and you only have so much ground to work with, and that's one of the things that we run into all the time, is either the school is absolutely landlocked and there's not much you can do with it, and then where they're placed, sometimes the road that's in front of it can only be a two-lane road. So it gets really tight in some places, and in some, it's the only road leading in and out of that area. So you don't have options for rerouting traffic, but we do the best we can.
I just think it would be nice to open those conversations. I think about York Elementary and the big green back there, even just making it so that was the extra drive that was pulling in. And we just have all those families that can't get home. You're actually blocking buses because they can't, either that or they gotta swerve around and go around the traffic. But it just seems like moving forward, if we're gonna have more people driving, that maybe it's something we need to address with all three of those entities to get some relief for people, so.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carroll, for that update.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is a finance update. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Now, Mr. Bill Bowen, our Chief Financial Officer, is going to share a few updates with you this evening related to the budget and end-of-year balances. Mr. Bowen.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Mr. Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor, thank you for this opportunity to provide you an update in the area of finance. So for this evening, I'm going to first start off with an update on our cash balances for our major funds through June 30 of 2021. And then I'll conclude with an update for FY22, specifically provide an update on enrollment and also an update, share some information on some additional federal funds that we recently were awarded. So these are our major funds, and these are the cash balances through June 30, 2021. I would like to point out that these funds are unaudited. The audit is currently underway. We expect that the audit to be completed by the end of October, but we don't expect that the numbers that you see here today will change significantly. But let me begin with the operating fund budget. Staff is projecting an end-of-year cash balance of $1.25 million. And how this will work is with the operating fund, these funds don't stay with the school division. They will revert back to the county. However, in previous years, and we'll follow the same practice, once this number is confirmed, I will prepare a resolution for the school board to consider to request that the Board of Supervisors reappropriate these funds to the school division. And most likely, we will ask for it to be reappropriated in a specific fund. That might be the health insurance fund, a CIP fund, or the tech reserve fund. Now, for the tech reserve fund, members, you'll recall this fund was created last year in response to our one-to-one program. On the heels of creating this fund, the board also approved a lease purchase finance option for the school division. This was for $2 million. We closed on that contract in August. Approximately 3 months later, we received some additional federal funds that were used for technology. One was a competitive grant that we applied for to the tune of about $450,000, and the other was some state funds, coronavirus relief funds that came to us in November, and we had until December 30th in which to spend them. So although we did have some flexibility of how to spend those funds, we used them for technology because that's where our need was. So by using those two pots of federal funds, we were able to preserve the balance mainly from that lease purchase financing option that we had. So with $3.87 million, that's a good balance to start with. However, in 2 years, we're going to have our first major refresh for technology. So this is one fund that we'll need to continue to watch because we'll need additional funds in order to go through that first refresh. The food service fund, $2.55 million. This is one of the highest balances we've had in the food service fund in recent memory. The reason for this is because last year the federal government decided to pay for all the student meals, and so we saw a significant increase in revenue, and then we also saw a significant decrease in our expenditures, and so we're about $1.5 million over what our historical balance is. Now we have to maintain at least 3 months of operating expenses and operating revenue in that fund. So we are currently working. Ms. Parr is working with Mr. Dolak to spend these funds. They're currently assessing the food service operations at each of the schools to see what kind of equipment needs to be replaced. Already, they've purchased some refrigerators and some walk-in freezers. The CIP fund, $3.34 million. This represents restricted cash from bond proceeds. This is not money that's really available. This money is already spoken for. And with the workers' comp fund, $2.83 million. These are funds that are held in reserve for potential worker comp claims. I will say that this balance is a little high. We may have a little bit of flexibility to shift some of these funds, possibly to the health insurance fund or CIP fund, if the need arises. And with the health insurance fund, we have $473,000 as of June 30. I will tell you that this balance is only in the positive because we had a significant transfer from our operating fund revenue to the tune of over $4 million. So we have done some things to mitigate these losses. You recall that we did raise rates for the coming plan year. That will be January 1. We also went back out to RFP, and we selected a new carrier. So January 1, we will be shifting from Cigna to Optima, and through that process, there was cost avoidance to the tune of $2.5 million. So Dr. Vladu and his staff, they're conducting informational sessions division-wide. The first one was last week through Teams, and the second one will be this Wednesday at 4 o'clock. We have representatives from Optima and Optima RX, our pharmacy provider, and they are there with short presentations and also to answer any questions. So I would encourage staff to join us on that Teams meeting and listen to the presentation. It's very informative. And then our last fund is the Revenue Stabilization Fund, $8.58 million. This is a fund that was created through a memorandum of understanding with the county many years ago and the school board. And this is where we receive excess impact aid funds over what we have budgeted in the operating budget. So currently we have $8.7 million of impact aid funds in our budget. So if we happen to receive $10 million in any given year, those excess funds would be deposited into the stabilization or reserve fund. This fund is on the high side. We do have some flexibility possibly to do some things with this fund, and I believe we'll have additional conversations specifically about this fund when the CIP is presented in December. And that concludes my update on the cash balances. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have. If not, okay, I'll move to FY22. So you'll recall this time last year and most of the fall, and actually into some of the winter, this is all I was talking about was enrollment. I was really concerned because what we were looking at as far as the pandemic, the reaction from the pandemic, we saw a significant decrease. But for this year, it's not so much of a budget impact because we've been held harmless. But I did want to review this with the board because this will impact our next budget cycle, which will begin here in the next month. But if you look from 2018 to 2019, we saw an increase of 136 students. And from 19 to 20, we saw 245 students, additional students. And then came the pandemic. And here what we saw, we were actually expecting or planning for an additional 141 students. And what happened is we lost 894. And so what's happened this year is that we've seen a little bit of a recovery. Now, historically, our enrollment projections are done by the County Planning and Development Department, by Mr. Tim Cross. I met with him last fall, but really there was no projection that he could provide us because his methodology couldn't account for a pandemic year. So I do show you what the Department of Education projected for us as far as enrollment, 12,420. I provided these numbers from day 5, 12,520. We're a little north of that, and it should grow a little bit every day. We typically see the numbers grow through the end of September and possibly even into October. But you'll see that 13,138 is our budget. That was our budget for last year. We're still currently funded on that budget. So all of the FTEs that are in our budget right now are based on 13,138 students. We did not make any changes. Not all of our positions are filled, so we do have some flexibility, but 13,138 remains our target. Now, if we look at where we are right now at 12,520, if we are aggressive and we say that we're going to add 300 students, we're at 13,820. That still leaves us 318 students from the 13,138 target. And that 300 students addition is actually the highest we would have achieved in the past 5 years. So that leaves us 318 students short, which means it would be a $1.6 million loss in state funding. So I share that with you now because we're getting ready to start the budget process. This will be really our first challenge because student enrollment is one of the significant budget drivers for funding. So as we look at kindergarten enrollment, from 18 to 19, we saw an increase of 75. From 19 to 20, an increase of 43. And then the pandemic, we saw a decrease of 231. So for this year, we've already seen an increase of 177, and we're only 54 down from our high of 2020. So that's very optimistic to see those numbers. And then finally, our homeschool students. So from 2018 to 19, we saw an increase of 6. And then in 19 to 20, we saw an increase of 67. And then with the pandemic, we saw an increase of 248. And those numbers have declined for this year by 134, but we're still 124 students off of our pre-pandemic high of 407. And then finally, on August 30th, Department of Education announced additional coronavirus stimulus funds. These are coronavirus fiscal recovery funds to the tune of $2.5 million. That's what our award is. These are specific use funds. In other words, they have to be used for the CIP, for ventilation, HVAC replacement, and improvement projects. What's unique to this is this has a 100% match requirement, which means they're going to provide us with $2.5 million. We have to match that with $2.5 million. What's good to note, though, is that we have two projects currently in FY22. One is the Seaford project, which has a significant HVAC component to it, and the other piece of that is Mount Vernon, which has a significant HVAC component. So we believe we have money budgeted in the CIP. However, what we're seeing right now is that the costs for some of these CIP projects are coming in 20 to 30% higher than what they were last year. So as I mentioned, I shared some of those cash balances of some of those funds. We do have some flexibility to move some funds around, and it looks like we may need to do that as we're seeing cost of construction projects increase. With these funds, the cost must be incurred by December 2024, and reimbursements must be completed by December 2026. So we have some time to work through this process. The application has yet to be released, but once that's released, there'll be some additional information, and we'll certainly update the board when that information is provided. And that concludes my report this evening.
I have a couple of questions. So as far as the HVAC, the money that was given, is that to update HVAC at all schools, or we're using it for specific projects that we've already had in the works?
Well, I'll just give you an idea. The HVAC project in Mount Vernon is $1.6 million alone. So it's really for projects that we have identified. That's the priority need because that's where it sits in FY22. And then, of course, the Seaford project.
Is there a concern because this money's going out for HVAC to the entire country that we're going to have shortage of supply like we've seen with why we've had to hold things off at other schools?
Certainly that's a consideration. We're seeing that with just about every other supply chain, yes.
Yeah, good grief. And then one question, I know you didn't necessarily talk about it. One of the questions we had after your last presentation with the ESSER funds.
Yes.
And there were some things that were earmarked in there for special education, and we had some families asking, why wasn't more earmarked out of ESSER for special education students? And I'm wondering if you can kind of address that. I know we spend a lot, and a lot of it is mandated as well, but if you would just kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yes, so at our last board meeting, we talked specifically about the ESSER 3 grant. This was the first grant that required public input and required, not only through the process of developing the application, but also the public had an opportunity to comment, and that was something that was required with these funds. The total award for that was about $5.2 million. And I can tell you that about 69% of that, which is about 3.5 million, is are funds that are allocated across the division that benefit all students, including special education. However, with the ESSER 3 funds, we carved out 15% specifically for special education programs. It's about $761,000, which is in line with our special education population.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen.
Anything else for Mr. Bowen? All right, thank you very much. Our next agenda topic is the staffing report. Dr. Shannon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Dr. Vladu is going to come up, and as you recall, he's come up for the past 3 months, so he's basically been updating these slides for a staffing report for you. He also has the next item, which is our vision plan. Dr. Vladu?
Thank you, Dr. Shandor, members of the board, and Chairman Higginbotham. At this time, I will provide a staffing update. As you remember, as Dr. Shandor stated, this follows the report on August 4th and August 27th. So first, I would like to begin with an update on our licensed positions. So this includes all of our teachers, administrators, and other service providers. So first, as you see at the elementary level, we have 4 special education positions that are still open. As you will note, at the last presentation, I reported that we have 5 elementary teaching positions open. Since then, we're able to hire 3 teachers, so we reduced that number to 2. We also have one school counselor position, one ESL teacher, and one library media position that is still open, as well as a reading specialist at the elementary level. On this slide, I would like to share staffing levels at the secondary level. As you can see, since I reported last, we filled the 2 Spanish and 1 French teacher's position through a combination of virtual positions, which are also augmented by the classroom instructional associate, as well as master schedule adjustment and combining some of those courses to get maximum efficiency when it comes to scheduling. So as a result, we have a qualified or highly qualified staff member for all of our students in world languages at the position that I share with you. We do still have 1 middle school French teacher position that we're trying to complete. We're looking at the 3 science vacancies, which have proven to be quite a challenge, particularly this time of the year, but we're working hard to fill those positions. We have 1 CTE position that we're filling, 1 history teacher position, as well as 1 reading specialist position at the middle school level that we're still working to fill. So now I would like to review some other licensed positions. Many of these positions are related to the ESSER position, the funding for the additional position, as well as the new SOQ requirements. So newly budgeted position, which I shared with you at the last board meeting, to include a school psychologist, 2 board-certified assistant behavior analysts, and 1 social worker. Those are new positions, and we're still working to hire them. Additionally, we're in the process of filling the 1 instructional innovation coach. Again, this time of the year is particularly difficult because oftentimes what will happen when somebody gets promoted to that position, that may be a classroom teacher unless, something else or somebody moves into the area. So it is impactful, even though when we fill this position, what often happens in the world of HR, it creates another vacancy that is very critical to our school division. Now I would like to review the non-licensed positions. Since I presented last time, we continue to hire several paraeducator positions. However, we continue to work very hard, and it's a labor market right now that is difficult in hiring non-licensed positions, and so we have a number of positions that we're still working to hire, and particularly in the area of special education as well as English learner paraeducators. We're also working to hire an occupational therapist, as you note on the slide. So next, I would like to talk about many of the critical positions that support teaching and learning in the York County School Division. As both Dr. Shandor as well as Dr. Carroll presented, we continue to work to fill those vacancies. We do have a few in the pipeline. However, we have 27 vacancies, and it's been impactful, and we'll continue to leave no stone unturned when it comes to filling those vacancies. In regards to custodian, we're about 2 or 3 higher than average there, so we haven't seen the declines that we've seen with other positions, but certainly we continue to contract out with express professionals to make up for that need. We're looking at 4 maintenance and warehouse, some office, clerical, 2 school crossing guards, which are essential, particularly at a couple of schools that have high traffic areas. And for IT, we're looking at 2 computer support technicians, a program analyst, as well as a unified communication administrator. So I share these action steps. I'll only focus on a couple. We're working to have a job fair, in-person job fair. Sometime in October, we will advertise those dates. We'll continue to be creative. We came to you and you approved the instructional associate position. That's resulted in us being extremely creative in filling those vacancies. We may have folks out there in these vacancies, particularly if they are multi-year, that if we find a teacher who particularly has been with us and teach Spanish or teaches French, we're certainly going to reach out to them and see how to staff those classrooms. It's not ideal, but we recognize that it is a qualified instructional teacher that's licensed in Virginia that can provide those services, because many of these requirements are graduation requirements. We want our students to be able to meet that, so we owe it to be creative to make sure that we address that need. And I will say this again, this is the promotional part of the presentation. If you want to be a bus driver, we could make that happen. You need a clean driving record. We have a training program, and as it was shared in the previous meetings, We're even working to do the testing here. So we're in the final stages of getting that done. And again, we will continue to work on that. But it's also important to understand this is a regional and a national shortage that's been reported in the media. Certainly, we understand there's a great need there. So this brings me to the end of this presentation, and at this time, I welcome your questions and comments.
So, Dr. Ledoux, with the bus drivers, one other question I had was, I know in the past, we had allowed the bus driver, if they have a young child that's not school age yet, to bring that child with them while they do the bus run. Are we still allowing that?
Yes, that is a great question, because I know folks that are thinking about taking this job or coming to get trained may have young kids and say, what do I do with them? Certainly, we have a standard operating procedure that allows bus drivers to do that. Many of them are taking care of kids that are preschool. And so again, that should not be a barrier in taking that job to our folks that are responsible for taking care of young children.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
How are we sitting with substitutes?
That's a great question. I pulled that data last week. We have 351 on our rolls. Since July 1, we have over 250 that have logged in. We have a data dashboard, and we monitor on a daily basis, and they've been taking job and logging in. So we are approaching pre-pandemic levels. Having said that, it's never 100% fill rate, but we've been averaging for the past couple of years 10% higher than the state and the national fill rate. Again, we don't want one classroom not to be covered, so it's always a work in progress.
So from a substitute standpoint, it doesn't sound like COVID's a factor in them not returning to the classroom. I'm sure it is for some, but.
It certainly is. We do have a number of staff. However, I can tell you, once the vaccine was available, those staff members that reached out to us that had concerns about being in the classroom, we welcomed them back. And they felt safe. Our mitigation protocols are working, and they feel very comfortable in being in our schools. What they stated, the bigger issue is, I don't know how to sub remotely. What do I do? Our teachers are in teams every day. If you're a sub, you may be in teams every week or every other week, depending on your level of frequency. So once we're in person, that has seemed to have addressed most of our needs. Having said that, we may have a handful that COVID may still be a problem for them, but for the most part, we're back where we need to be.
All right, Dr. Ledoux, I just had a couple of questions. Is there a way that we can be proactive in hiring? What I mean by that is, can we hire and carry a bench for those positions that we know are going to be tough to fill? Like, say that, God forbid, we get overstaffed with sped teachers. Could we carry a couple?
Yeah, I'll remind the board members, 3 years ago, we started hiring, early hiring for special ed teachers. I think the first year Dr. Carroll was 14, and then we went to 17. So that is a strategy that we utilize. Unfortunately, the pool of candidates just isn't out there right now.
Right.
That's been a struggle for us.
I've found a lot of times that hiring is relational, from people that network and they know people in other divisions or whatever, and we can get them from there. The question that I have is, can our student teachers, because this is happening in a couple of other divisions, can we make an offer, and if all they have left is student teaching, to bring them on as a provisional teacher and let them have the classroom with the support of their team?
We are certainly looking at that. I know we brought a couple of folks before you to where we're releasing them on sabbaticals to complete their teaching requirements. That's been particularly helpful to allow the per policy to allow folks to complete that student teaching requirement through the leave of absence. There's certainly some challenges to work through that, because they would, again, the qualifications of Virginia are pretty high. And certainly, we could look at that. We don't have quite that worked out yet. I'm not aware that many folks are guaranteeing a position to somebody who has years to go. But we have explored that. We'll continue to do that. So again, I don't have a specific path today, but it's not something that, or it is something that we'll consider.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I could add, Mr. Schaefer, our principals know who those student teachers are. They work with them a lot closer than any of us do. So they have their eye on, their quick study of,
Who they want to keep.
correct.
Oh, I know.
Correct.
The other question I have is, as far as transfers within the division, okay? Now, I know we lost some teachers last year that wanted to transfer within the division. Now, since we had the same standards at every school as far as expectations for teachers, could we not make it a strict policy, but give it more that we would honor a transfer request within the division from a qualified teacher, rather than lose them to another division?
Certainly, we do have a standard operating procedure on transfer within the division. I do think there are some caveats that need to be considered. Certainly, late, after July 15th, it poses, well, when one employee goes from one school to another, both principals will have to agree on that because it creates a vacancy for a principal that he or she may not be able to fill, and also those parents in that community that were looking forward to having a teacher. So our process does allow incrementally. However, the closer we get to the start of school, the more impact both communities would have. So again, both principals need to be on board, and we have worked with some staff. However, here's sort of the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is after July 15th. We have a process that announces that if you plan to resign and you plan to retire, to please let us know in January. And as I'm looking at the numbers and we look at patterns and we look at trends, oftentimes if somebody lets a principal know and HR know on August 20th that they're retiring, which they plan to retire for obviously that's not a decision to make in one day. Those really are the positions that are hard to fill because as you will see in next month's report on class size, in maintaining the class size, we do have a robust teacher workforce to maintain that. However, it's the late resignations and late retirements after July 15, which are the most impactful to our students and our schools.
Yeah, I could very well see that. So I go back to the point before about, is it possible to carry a bench for some of these positions that are
We
highly
abso-
sought after,
we
not just
absolutely-
sped, but
we-
like the math in
We
middle
absolutely
school
would
and.
carry a bench if the
Yeah.
bench existed. We
Okay,
certainly would.
that's good.
yeah.
My last one, and then, and then I'll let you go. My last one is, what retention tools do we have in place for teachers as it is now?
Well, one of the things when you look at the reason why people stay, and so one of the things we started in 2016 was the working conditions survey, and there are about 12 factors on there, and we'll bring that information before you at the next month. So we know that how you feel about your job, being able to be effective, being able to get along with your peers, being able to feel supported by your supervisor, those are things that matter. We think about our own families and our own jobs. So we collect that data, and we work with our schools, and we continue to work on those factors, but we'll bring you that information in the presentation at the next meeting or the meeting after that.
Okay.
It's a high rate. It's a high number for teachers who want to stay and staff who want to stay in YCSD. It's in the high 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
But we'll share that specific information with you soon.
Thanks.
Are incentives still in play, the referral bonus, sign-on bonus?
That's right, for the positions that are approved in the pay plan, particularly the hard-to-fill position, yes.
Okay.
We have not, if you're referring to teaching positions and other positions, no, we, at this time, that is not a practice that we engage in as far as referral bonus, but certainly we could look at that.
Sure. Referral bonus, and perhaps, I'll just ring the bell one more time, third-party vendor, so, particularly for those very difficult positions to fill.
They have, and we have worked with a third-party vendor. However, when you get down to the detail about who, what, where, licensure, hiring, protocols, criminal background check, out-of-state, it often, and this Code of Virginia, there's just a lot to work through. But we have explored that, and we spend many, many hours with our staff here, collaborate with instruction to ensure that we make a good decision.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item on our agenda is a vision plan. Dr. Shandor.
Yep, Dr. Gladue is going to stay right where he is and provide you an update related to the health insurance vision plan. Dr. Gladue.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor, Mr. Higginbottom, and members of the board. I have a very short update for you on our health plan. As Mr. Bowen has shared, certainly we are having this meeting with our employees, and we have several of those meetings coming up during open enrollment, as well as the informational meeting to our healthcare committee and all employees. We invited all employees to these meetings. But that is the purpose of tonight, is to make you aware, and also our viewing public aware of our vision plan. As you're aware, currently, or the current plan provides one exam per year. But we also know that many of our staff rely on these things to go about their day, to really go about doing their job. So under the new plan, we work very hard to make sure that the benefits will be either comparable or enhanced. One of the things that will be enhanced is the vision plan. So in addition to the annual exam, which our employees have been given for as long as we can remember, the new plan will offer up to $130 for frames every 2 years. Every year, however, there's a zero copay for contact lenses up to a certain amount, as well as the standard plastic lenses that many of us, again, use in our eye gear. Additionally, the plan would offer significant discounts for glasses, if folks want to get a second pair of glasses, or their families that take insurance with us. Laser vision correction, again, a discount there, not that it will not be covered by the insurance, but it will be a significant discount, as well as other lens enhancements such as polarized and all kinds of treatments that will be available more specifically. So we recognize that our employees rely on good eye and health care and corrective optical products. So we're excited to offer this additional benefit to our employees who are on the, who take our health insurance beginning on January 1, 2022. So thank you for the opportunity to present this new feature of the health insurance plan. At this time, I will take any questions that you might have.
Who's the provider?
It's, our new provider will be Optima.
It is through Optima?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gladue.
Thank you.
Next, we move on to strategic plan updates. The first one is for Goal 1, Objective 1.1, state and federal targets. Dr. Shandor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Higginbotham, and again, good evening, board members. Next, we have Ms. Candy Skinner, our Chief Academic Officer. She is going to actually do both presentations for you this evening related to Goal 1, Objective 1.1, and Objective 1.2, third grade reading. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Skinner.
Oh, goodness. Good evening. Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Tonight, I'm going to provide you with an update on the first two objectives listed under Goal 1 of the strategic plan. This goal states that our students will consistently demonstrate growth and excellence in the skills and knowledge needed to become productive citizens. Under this goal, there are two objectives. The first one talks about state and federal targets, and the third is centered around third grade reading. Throughout the year, the Virginia Department of Education has provided the following guidance regarding the purpose of SOL testing. These assessments are intended to be one of many tools that provide information on where students are excelling and also where they're struggling in order to design instruction and academic supports for this upcoming school year. Because of the unprecedented challenges that schools have faced this year, school divisions have been asked to refrain from comparing this year's student performance to previous school years. Therefore, the information I'm going to share with you tonight will look a little bit different than how I've presented it, or it has been presented in the past. Before I share the student performance data, I want to take a moment to provide some helpful background information regarding this past year. As you know, the SOL tests were canceled during the 2019-20 school year. So that means that this year's tests are the first state assessments our students have taken in 2 years. Also, these tests were required by federal law, and so there are several factors that should be considered when we analyze the results that I'm going to share with you tonight. First, we saw fewer students at the high school level taking assessments this year, and that is really due to the change in graduation requirements. Beginning with this year's senior class, The state reduced the number of required verified credits from 6 or 9, depending on which diploma type that you were seeking, to 5 for all students. This change significantly reduced the number of students taking SOL tests in subjects like chemistry, World History 2, and Virginia U.S. History. Because federal accountability does not require states to administer the history or the writing assessments, the state did provide us with some options this year to use local alternative assessments in lieu of SOL test. We selected to use those in the subjects that are listed here, which was grade 4 Virginia Studies, grade 8 Civics, and grade 8 Writing. And then finally, students were given the option this year to defer their required SOL test in World History 1 or Earth Science to next year, which would be this year, where they can sit and take the World History 2 and Biology. So students could choose to do that as well. In the past year, we have typically shared the school quality indicators that are listed on the right of the slide when providing state accreditation data. However, accreditation rates were not provided this year. They were not calculated. So division and school, all division and school ratings are accreditation waived. That being said, though, you can still visit the Virginia Department of Education, and you can really look at how our division did and by schools as well. It's all there in the school quality profiles. Federal accountability, on the other hand, was not waived this year. And tonight, I'll share performance data on reading, math, and science, as well as subgroup performance and participation rates. Because benchmark targets have not been provided, we're really unable to make any comparison between our student performance to a specific target. And I will mention that federal graduation indicator data, we are expecting to receive that on September 30th, so that will be coming as well. So now I'm going to begin sharing some of the progress on our first objective, which looks at state and federal targets. This slide shows our student performance in reading, and as noted at the bottom of the screen, this year's assessment is measuring new reading standards. Every so number of years, VDOE updates our standards, and our assessments then will look at new reading standards. The second column is the state average, and the third column is the division average. So based on the data you see here, our student performance exceeded the state average for each grade level, and overall, we really did not see any significant declines in student performance for reading this year. Now we're going to take a look at some math data. While these outcomes do not mirror our traditional student data, it does follow state and national trends, and it does reflect that predicted outcome based on our progress monitoring last school year. Similar to reading, our school division did outperform the state average at all levels. And one area of noted concern is Math 7, which shows a 47% pass rate. Just to give you a little bit of background about Math 7, there are 3 math pathways at the middle school level, and Math 7 is considered to be on grade level. We have 39% of our 7th graders who were enrolled in Math 7 last year. And out of those 39%, only 89% participated in the SOL test. So as we look at kind of what's going to come up next is we're going to be talking about talking with our teachers and our administrators on how we can help support them when it comes to preparing these students this year. We are planning to work very closely with our pre-algebra 8 teachers. So Math 7 students go to pre-algebra 8, so we've already started working with those teachers. We'll continue to work with them and making sure that our students, any unfinished learning, any learning gaps, we close those up as we continue to work and advance through this year's curriculum. So that has already been underway. And then as we look at science performance, you can see that our students did outperform the state averages in all areas, with the exception of earth science. And if you recall from earlier in my presentation, I shared some background information that impacted some of the outcomes that we've seen in our data, and this is true for earth science. So students who were scheduled to take their earth science test this year were given the option to defer to biology this school year. So based on that option, about 55% of our students enrolled in earth science last year opted to take the SOL test. Additionally, the state gave them another option. Any student who took the test and scored in the range of 350 to 399, which is slightly below passing, could qualify for an emergency locally awarded verified credit if they passed the class for the year. Because of this option, very few of our students who failed the test opted to take an expedited retake. So now we're going to take a look at local and state participation rates for reading, math, and science. In a typical school year, participation in federally required tests would usually be around 99% at the state and the local level. However, with the remote progress test option and many parents choosing not to have their students take the SOL test, the state did see a large decline in participation rates. While we saw a slight decline in our rates, we did exceed those state participation rates for all subjects. So this data presented on the slide looks at subgroup performance in the areas of reading, math, and science. While students in each subgroup outperform the state average, it is evident that there are students in these subgroups that have unfinished learning. We've been working very closely with our school staff to implement pre-assessments as well as differentiation strategies to address these areas. We're going to continue to monitor our student progress throughout the school year. So the second objective I mentioned earlier is third grade reading. And so what I'll do now is share a little bit about our third grade outcomes. Again, our goal is that 90% of our third grade students will be reading at or above grade level. So this chart illustrates achievement for grade 3 reading over the last 5 school years. As I shared earlier, this was a unique year because the SOL test assessed the new English standards, which is noted here with an asterisk. And then while we expected some declines in our student progress this year, I'm pleased to share that our division pass rates for third grade was 86%. And if you look there, you can see that is actually 3 percentage points higher than it was in 2019. So we're very proud of that. So I want to take a moment as we go to the next part of the presentation to just take a moment to thank some people. I think there's a lot of hard work that went into last year. First, I want to recognize the tremendous commitment of our teachers and our staff. They worked tirelessly to ensure our students continued to learn and made academic progress. I also think our families deserve a wealth of thanks and appreciation. Last year, from driving to school to helping teach students at home alongside the teacher, we really embodied our homeschool partnerships with them. I also think that a lot of our success last year came from our goal to get students back into school as soon as possible. And last but not least, I think I want to recognize our Board of Supervisors for their generous donations or support, in helping us acquire the technology we needed to make sure that that home and school connection was seamless. So a lot of people last year, a lot of hard work, and wanted to just recognize those people this evening. So actions to date, as I shared earlier in our presentation, we've already begun to take some steps to help our students fill this unfinished learning. First, our instructional department has changed coordinator responsibilities to allow single core subject focus, and we've also increased our coordinator time in schools. So that's one action step we've taken. During our pre-service August training, we really focused on teaching and working with our teachers about pre-assessments, how to give those pre-assessments, how to use that information to differentiate instruction as you're teaching this year's content. Each of our school divisions also develop school improvement plans, and within those school improvement plans, they have action steps to address unfinished learning in English and in math, and that's in every school. And then as I shared earlier, we have our ESSER grants that we've been awarded, and we have lots of resources and things in our grant that will help us this year with that unfinished learning. And lastly, This past summer, we made several changes to Summer Academy. I'm going to share some of those with you, but before I do that, just as I shared earlier, I want to thank, we had a number of administrators and teachers that really stepped up this year for Summer Academy. They helped us think out of the box a little bit, really put their full efforts into making it an amazing summer for our students. And I want to recognize their efforts. So Summer Academy this year, we did a lot of things, but one of the things that we felt was really important was to make sure that any student who wanted to come to Summer Academy could come. So we offered additional enrollment opportunities for our students. We also added additional sites. We went from 2 elementary schools to 3, and we opened up a secondary location up in the Bruton zone. We extended the length of the school day this summer, and we worked really hard to put as much engaging activities as we could in the school day. We added things like PE, hands-on learning, music, library, and STEM activities. We also, because of that, added several additional staff members to our Summer Academy. And then last but not least, this year we also added several extension opportunities for our students. We added 6 elementary camps, which included Readers Theater, STEM Enrichment, Young Authors, English Learner Enrichment Academy, and one called ABC Easy as 1, 2, 3, which was a great fun for the kids. And at the middle school level, we added 3 camps: Advanced Course Prep, Literature Circles, and STEM camps. We also added AP boot camps for the first time this year, and these included Calculus, English 11 and 12, Environmental Science, History, Human Geography, and Statistics. So this slide shows a few of the highlights from elementary school. We had 411 students participate at the elementary level. We had 150 students participate in our camps, and our average daily attendance in Summer Academy was about 89%. And then we did use pre and post data for our students who attended Summer Academy. We wanted to make sure we tailored instruction to where they were academically, and we also did a post-assessment that's going to help us as those students go into school this year. I'm pleased to share that we saw progress in both math and reading with those pre and post assessments. At the secondary level, we had 235 students participate in those AP boot camps that I mentioned a few minutes ago. We also did something different this year in Summer Academy in the area of algebra and chemistry. Those 2 classes are foundational classes, and we wanted to offer families, if they were interested, an opportunity for students to revisit that curriculum if they chose to this summer. So through virtual learning modules and also teacher support, supplemental live sessions with a teacher, we had 76 students participate in those in that opportunity. We did have 83 students participate in some of our school enrichment programs, which are our camps. And we had 139 high school credits recovered this summer, and we had 2 students graduate. So a lot of accomplishments. Very proud of that work, and I sincerely appreciate the work of those teachers and administrators that stepped up to help us this summer. So as we look at the new school year, we'll be focused on addressing areas of unfinished learning while also ensuring our students receive instruction on this year's standards. As explained by the Virginia Department of Education, rather than focusing on and starting the year with remediation of last year's curriculum, we'll be building it as we learn the new content. So by using pre-assessments and differentiation, we can identify and combine any content not mastered last year and new information taught this year. So that's our approach to the school year. And as the data that I shared with you this evening does show our student progress on one measure, which is the SOL test, but it does not include information on students who chose to opt out or any of our new students. As you know, we always get a lot of new students in the school year. We don't have that data for those students. So we also want to recognize that a lot of our students this summer may have done some things where they've gotten some academic gains. And so we want to make sure we get the most up-to-date information on our students. So over the next few weeks, we will be doing a variety of assessments with our students just to make sure we have the most up-to-date information on them so that we can plan instruction this year that meets their needs. In October, I plan to come back and I'm going to share more about some of the things that we're doing to support our students as we go through this school year. So I know I've shared a lot with you this evening. This concludes my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I always look at me to go first. One of the things you didn't mention in there was e-tutoring, and I think, I know specific kids that were really, really helped by that, so I think, shout out to the people that did, perform the e-tutoring. And you said you are going to continue that this year as well?
Yes, it is
Okay.
part of our ESSER grant, and we are planning to continue that process, yes.
That's great. And I know I asked a question that they said was instructional when Dr. Carroll was up, so I'm going to ask that now. So during when kids are quarantining, I know the expectation is teachers are going to reach out, they're going to put work on Canvas. A specific example would be if a teacher's going to post work for algebra, but the child hasn't gotten the lesson for that. If they're going to do that work and turn it in when they haven't had the lesson, how are we going to address that? Because I know the expectation isn't that everybody's going to do a concurrent or that there's going to be a lesson posted. I know some teachers are recording those, but how can that be addressed?
So we've encouraged our teachers, each subject is so different. And so what we really asked our teachers to make sure that they're doing is that a student isn't given an assignment when they haven't received first instruction. So it is their responsibility to make sure that students are getting that first instruction. That could be a videotaped lesson. It could be a video that they use for the students. It could be the teacher calling that student at the end of the day and kind of going over that information, or a group of students together. Our teachers are approaching it very differently, and we wanted to give them the flexibility with the importance of knowing that students must receive that first instruction so that they can find success with completing that work. But it does look a little bit different class by class, and I would say if there is a parent or a student that might be struggling, to please make sure they reach out to their teacher and talk to the teacher about that. I know our teachers are trying to be as flexible as possible in supporting their students through this.
Okay, thank you.
So, Ms. Skinner, just one thing. I know we're not to compare our numbers with our previous numbers because it was so different with the pandemic. But if we were to compare our numbers with the other divisions in the region, or even a two-part question here, other comparable divisions in the state, how did we rank?
So I have looked at that information just because I think it is important for us to know the outcomes of our students. And I would say you're absolutely right. We really should not be comparing ourselves to other school divisions simply because of a number of factors. But our students did perform very well across the state, and I would say that we are at the top as far as how our students performed. But I would say, again, just that's a cautionary because of
Well, and I bring that up because I think we do need to, like you said, commend our teachers, our staff, our students, our families, because they all worked hard during this pandemic to make this happen, to keep the learning going on. So thank you.
I know we increased the scope of summer academy significantly. Is the intent to sustain some of those enhancements next year?
It is. We've actually have some ESSER funds that we've requested to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's our goal to continue to provide some of the opportunities I've shared and expand on that. Our summer camps were very popular with our families, and AP Boot Camp, we're actually following up with our students to see how those students are doing this year with that information, with the intent that we can hopefully expand some of those AP Boot Camp opportunities for our students.
And back to outcomes, as we just discussed, I think the participation rate, I just can't get over 94, 95, and 96%. That's
It's
just
very
amazing.
high. If you
Yeah.
look across the
It's
division, our
remarkable.
participation rate is very high.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Ms. Skinner, I'm looking, and forgive me if I'm a month ahead, but on your October updates, you have a list of like the assessment updates that you're going to provide us. But I'm just looking at like the number of assessments that there, and thinking that some of those assessments have already been taken. And it's important that we find out where our students are so we can meet their needs at this point, especially with questions with unfinished learning with COVID. But having MAP assessments, the state growth assessments and reading assessments, it just seems like an awful lot to put on young kids' shoulders in the first 10 days of school, and for the teachers of data overload. Is there any way that we're able to sort of space stuff out or combine things?
We worked with our principals, and I believe we also had some teacher input as to how we wanted to administer those assessments and at what pace we wanted to do that. That information is how we developed our assessment calendar. And while this might look like a lot here, remember, MAP assessment isn't for every grade. It's for a select group of students. The state growth assessment is required.
Yeah.
This year it is a very short assessment, it's not lengthy. But we were very careful to make sure that any assessment that we chose had purpose and value for our students and for our teachers. And so we certainly don't want to start a year out with assessing, but we felt this year, more than any year prior, it is critically important for us to know how our students are and where they are academically, because we want to make sure that we are meeting their needs as quickly as possible so that they feel confident this year. If there's something from last year that they didn't quite master, we want to make sure that we teach that to those students. We know that, we teach that to that student so they feel confident in their content this year. And so every assessment that you see here, again, I want you to know we've really looked at this as a division and made some decisions about which assessments we would give, and we did try to involve as many stakeholders as we could.
Thank you.
I think more importantly is to, not only that, what the point that Ms. Skinner just made is what we do with that data. So that our grade levels and our content teams and their PLC meetings can really comb through that data so they have a firm understanding of where our students are performing. If I could add, I couldn't agree more with Mr. Myatt's comment related to the participation rate. So when you think about 95%, that is significantly higher than many other school divisions. That speaks to our families, that speaks to our teachers, that speaks to that the parental engagement and family engagement, all the work that our schools do. It really speaks to it, because we wouldn't have certainly not have had that high of a percentage for participation rate. Also, when you look at our third grade reading scores, we know how critical that number is for third grade. And we've been tracking that for decades, because that's when students learn to read, then read to learn. And I couldn't be more proud of those results when you look at those. And the question about the assessments makes me think about Bethel Manor. So, Bethel Manor is a school that has a lot of mobility due to the military and those students in and out of that school year after year. And I know when the parents bring their students to enroll at Bethel Manor, while the parents filling out paperwork, the reading specialists take the student down the hallway to assess them, so that they know exactly where they are the first day they hit school. So, and that speaks to her 84% pass rate for third grade. So again, really, really proud of our teachers, our administrators, and Ms. Skinner's done a really great job of leading her instructional department to support our schools.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on, we go to our policy section of this meeting. We have a first reading of policy section JB, Equal Educational Opportunities, Non-Discrimination of the York County School Board Policy. Dr. Shandor, do you have some comments to share?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. Really, the only comment I have to share is that there are no further changes. But if there's any comments or questions from the board, we have staff members here this evening and Ms. Berry who will address any of those comments or concerns.
I do have one or two quick questions from Ms. Berry, our attorney. So we're not specifically adopting the state model policy. We already have policies in place. This is clarification that address the transgender policy. And the two minor changes we're making tonight, or not tonight, but our next meeting, if we accept them, will basically allow us to be in compliance with any current Supreme Court rulings on transgender. Is that correct?
The changes will enable us to be in compliance with the law, as well as the basic tenets of the model policies. So we are complying as we are required by state law.
Okay. But we're not having to adopt that specific model policy because we've already
No,
done
we're
most
not
of it.
adopting exactly what is written in those
Okay.
model policies.
So the next question is probably for Dr. Butler, I believe. I'm glad you stepped up. When we talk about transgender students, I think a lot of people, a lot of citizens are thinking, 17, 18-year-olds, but that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, sir. What the policy says is anyone that is consistent or persistent in their belief and sincerely held belief, and so it could be any age from K to 12. But again, that is something that they look at the developmental age of the child. That is something that we work very closely with parents and with the family to try to help them understand where they are developmentally.
So at the elementary level, middle school level, not just high school?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
I have two questions, but really they're to kind of clear up some misinformation that I think is out in the community. I know we had people that came and spoke last time, and they seemed to understand or think that we were training teachers to train children to be transgender. And so I wanted to give the opportunity for you guys to clear that up as far as what training we're providing our staff in regards to this. And again, just clear that up for our community.
No problem. Yes, ma'am. So in school board policy, GCL, which is professional development, it specifically makes sure that we train staff in the prevention of bullying behaviors, and that is the training that our staff have been provided. We provide that training all the time as far as the recognition of bullying behaviors, how do we respond to bullying behaviors, and then how our staff can work with families and students in situations where they might feel there's an issue of harassment. And so that's the training we've been providing teachers, not necessarily anything different than just what we normally do as far as supporting students and families who are in situations.
So again, giving them training on what to recognize as far as bullying and how to handle that. So that's the training our staff receive.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then my other question was, I know there was some concern over the language. It's very difficult with this model policy because there's so much wording in there when really the policy pieces are kind of in a bold color. But the language as far as keeping things from parents, and this might be a Melanie Berry question, but making sure that we're not hiding things from parents. I think the wording was if a student isn't out to their parents, that we would use discretion. Can you talk a little bit about that language so parents understand we're not hiding things?
Yes, so our policies that we have, as educators, we are mandatory reporters. So in situations where a student is in danger of safety or there's some type of mental health issue, then yes, we were supposed to keep certain things confidential, and we work with our Department of Social Services. But in other matters, we're supposed to have positive relationship with parents, and so we should not be concealing information from parents. But if there is a situation where a child is in danger, then we do have policies and procedures under state regulations to follow in those cases. But again, we are supposed to be working to create positive relationships with families and students, and only in those situations where there is some type of significant safety danger or some issue where our staff members have to report things under the confidentiality policies when it comes to child safety.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure I sort of understand some of the wording. As I'm reading it through, it looks like we're adding to the protected classes of the anti-discrimination policy we have there and providing accommodations for the new protected classes that's in there, but it also could be other additional students who wanted to have those accommodations as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's the only question I had. Anything else?
Thank you.
Nope, and legal
Okay.
exposure was
Yeah, thank you very
qualified.
much.
All right,
So
thank you
thanks.
very much. We also have a first reading on policy section JO, student records of the York County School Board. Dr. Shandor.
Yes, and again, this is another one where there's no further changes.
Okay.
Unless there's questions or comments from board members.
I think we've covered it all with the first one, or at least I did anyway.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
Okay. With that being said, our work session is adjourned. Our next regular meeting will be held at 7 p.m. on Monday, September 27th, here at York Hall. I hope everyone has a great evening.
That came fast.